Most of us still do not have email at work and sometimes have to get off work before we can go to the administration building to use a fax machine. Communication is not easy, as it is in other library environments. When the principal librarians arranged conference calls, the agendas were limited to needed documentation, collection development issues, new laws, etc. Some of us do not have speakerphones. I had to walk halfway across the institution to my boss's desk to listen to the conversation in his presence. For all these reasons, we have had no clout in our numbers or an effective vehicle for communicating with each other as a group. I used to know most of my colleagues. I no longer do. Besides communication, you have the problem of the Department of Corrections bureaucracy as a whole. The librarians would be eliminated entirely, except we are the only way inmates get their constitutionally mandated access to the court. It seems that they let us grudgingly exist. I have been months without any budget. I pick up donated paperbacks at bookstores and public libraries. Library materials bought by the department have been limited to court-mandated legal books bought centrally now in Sacramento. Library innovations such as automated circulation engendered fear on the part of custody, since it required a library card, which might be converted into a fake ID. In a public library setting, the powers and control are elected officials who in essence work for your patrons and respond to their wishes. In my library, the powers and control are the jailers of my patrons, who often consider them unworthy of any service. So far, my patrons cannot vote. All they can do is contact people who care. Even children in poor schools have the advantage in getting advocates because they have not yet committed crimes. In both instances, educational neglect fosters potential for harm to society. Prison system, as I said, is a very expensive proposition for the state. However, due to court cases brought about by inmates and the court reacting to a high percentage of inmate deaths, the prison medical services are now under a court receiver who has mandated more and better qualified medical staff and facilities. Inmate appeals are our hope for improvement. That means the inmates have to realize what a good library means to them and demand it. Since we have not bought books, we joined a local library cooperative and borrow books on interlibrary loan. I bring these in weekly from public library branch. All the inmates are very grateful that they can request books they want to read. In September, there was a cell search in one of the yards where the officers confiscated 40 of these ILLs, books which were marked with a special paper sleeve belonging to the library system. They sent most of them to recycling. So much for respecting the library. Since I heard Camila, I have emailed my colleagues that I know in other prisons, and they responded favorably to asking inmates to write. I have also spoken to all 10 of my clerks and to several of my regular patrons and suggested recipients for their letters. For example, I asked an American Indian if he knew the local tribal leaders. He said he did, so I suggested he write to them. I also suggested their friends, family, the Secretary of the Department of Corrections, state legislators, etc. I suggested a soft approach, indicating what the library means to them, what they can get from it, how it helps with avoiding coming back to prison, how important it is, especially now that so many opportunities they had for education and rehabilitation have been eliminated. The department is adjusting to having to terminate teachers, at the same time having to prevent recidivism, as well as the fear that parole inmates will revert to crime. They haven't internalized the idea that a library can help solve literacy and educational problems that cause recidivism. They also haven't fully realized that use of the library keeps inmates busy and out of trouble, thus easier to supervise. The correctional bureaucracy is reactionary and not proactive, especially when providing services to inmates. I want to give you 2 examples of improvement due to inmate action. When I was first hired in Calipatria State Prison, it was due to, a month, the prison was due to open a month later after I was hired. Only 1 set of law books had been purchased prior to opening. Within 3 months, an inmate sued because the books he wanted were not on the shelf and the library clerks were not trained enough to suit him. Headquarters sent me videos for training, and I was given a 3rd clerk for each library, and I could buy books for each of the yards. When the court receiver showed up, the clerks were able to answer all his questions, and he commented that any lawyer would be glad to have a library like this. A few years ago, this is my 2nd example, at the Youth Authority, inmate families sued because the inmate didn't have access to special education. As a result, more teachers were hired. They got over a 50% increase in salary, and some of this was transferred also to the adult prisons. The adult teachers got the same thing now. They are paid according to their education. Those with master's degrees earn the most. Of course, librarians were not included because it was decided that since we do not have teaching credentials or classrooms, we're not educators. Maybe that many teachers have been laid off. Now that many teachers have been laid off, we can disprove this notion with the help of our patrons. Through this panel, I hope that I learn how better to do frontline advocacy and that the ALA membership as a whole remembers to advocate for prison libraries to anyone interested in helping inmates, who often are the result of society's failures, for them to become better citizens when they return to society.